to everyone who's already here. Let me just put in the pinned comment and then we can start chatting. And we have Alpesh here as well. So just so that everybody knows, hi Alpesh.
Hi Tanya, how are you?
I'm alright, how are you? Let me just
Very
pin
good.
the comment so we know it's you here. Perfect.
How
So,
are you?
Alpesh,
All well?
I'm alright. I'm doing perfectly fine in the very hot and humid weather over here. How about you?
All good. Yeah, we've had a lovely start of a day. It's lunchtime here in London, and enjoyed a great lunch with my two daughters who
Okay.
baked a lovely cake for me for Father's Day. So
Oh wow.
very happy day. Yeah, absolutely. It's a lovely day.
That sounds really wonderful.
How about you? Have you had any good starts to the day there? Is it a big celebration?
Actually, we kind of just taking a Sunday off sort of thing today, like because I work with my parents, right? So we're just taking time off from each other today. That's how we're doing Father's Day.
Yeah, that's
But
nice sometimes.
yeah, it is nice sometimes.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to do a quick introduction for you and then talk about the kind of work IVF London does and what you do. And then we're going to head on to some of the questions that I received. Sounds good?
Oh, yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
All right. So Alpesh here is a world-renowned expert in fertility and especially in genetic analysis of embryos before they grow bigger. To put it in the simplest terms. Would you like to explain it in a different way? I'm not sure how I can explain PGD in even simpler
Sure.
terms.
So, yeah, I'll explain that a bit more. So, some of us may know that when couples are sometimes trying to conceive, they may carry a genetic disorder which can be passed over to their children when they're trying to conceive, whether this is naturally or whether this is through IVF. So, all of you may know the term in vitro fertilization, which is a method of assisted reproduction, and it's become a very popular way around the world to tackle infertility. And this is something we're going to be talking a bit more about. But what pre-implantation genetic testing is about is trying to identify embryos that are free of a genetic disorder. Some of you may have heard that there are genetic conditions like thalassemia, cystic fibrosis, breast cancer. All of these can be genetically transmitted onto the children. And what the technology now enables us to do via IVF and in vitro fertilization is we can create these embryos in the laboratory and then test them for the genetic disorders so that couples who are trying to avoid transmitting this onto their offspring can successfully eliminate the embryos that are affected. So in a nutshell, that's what PGT is about.
Excellent. That's very well put, especially for a non-medical audience, I would say. So as you can all see, Alpesh is clearly the expert in all of this. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about male fertility in honor of Father's Day. And Alpesh is going to be answering some questions that we received from the followers through the day and also over time. And we're going to try and bust some myths as usual, as that's what we do here. And in addition to that, Alpesh is also going to give us a little bit knowledge about assisted reproduction. So different techniques, we're going to talk a little bit about those. And let's head on straight to the questions.
Sure, sounds good.
Excellent. So the first question that I received from a lot of people, surprisingly, was that people don't know how to assess fertility. So could you give us an idea of how we test for fertility in men?
Sure. So in men, testing for fertility is via a routine semen analysis. And again, it can be done on any day, unlike certain tests in women, which can only be done at a certain time in the menstrual cycle. Men can test their sperm at any time. We usually recommend that there is about 2 to 3 days of abstinence from any kind of ejaculation or sexual intercourse so that we get a realistic opinion and picture about the male infertility. So the test is literally a routine semen analysis. The man produces a semen sample, preferably at the clinic, so that the time between production and analysis can be measured. And what we do is we assess a tiny drop of the semen under a microscope, and we look at the most routine parameters that we look for in a semen analysis, namely sperm count, sperm motility, how fast the sperm are swimming, and also normal forms, how many sperm are normal looking. And again, just to give you some kind of background around what these benchmarks are. So the World Health Organization has classified a normal semen analysis to be at least 15 million sperm per mil. Ideally, at least 40% of those should be moving or motile. And out of the motile ones, at least 32% should be progressively moving. And talking about normal forms, around 4% of the sperm should be normal looking. Although this sounds very small in number, 4%, but again, in a routine semen analysis, we do look at the sperm health and even the shape of the sperm. So this is what encompasses a normal semen analysis. Apart from that, we also look at some more complex tests that can be done in men, such as to look at the sperm DNA integrity or the genetic integrity of sperm, which is called sperm DNA fragmentation. And again, I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that. But typically, as I said, a routine semen analysis takes about half an hour. Generally, I would suggest that most men who are trying to conceive would be assessed for fertility at their clinic. In UK, a lot of men now do this as a well-men test, just like women do their ovarian reserve test to see what their ovarian reserve is like and what their anti-Mullerian hormone level is like. So men routinely also do a semen analysis to find out about their fertility status.
So basically, anybody can walk into an IVF clinic and get their semen assessed any day of the week whenever they want and see how many healthy sperm they have and how good their well-men status is, essentially.
Absolutely, yes. And I think it's a test that I recommend most, even whether you're trying to conceive or whether you're not trying to conceive. But Tanea, one of the things we see in fertility, at least in the IVF sector, is that by the time couples are trying to conceive or have realized that there is a problem because conception is not happening naturally, either it is a bit too late, probably on the front of the woman, because most likely we see a declining ovarian reserve with age. We all know that women are leaving conception to a lot more later now. The average age of having your first child is typically in excess of 35, 36. So people, patients are leaving it much longer to have their first child for various reasons, for careers, for education. So I believe that a well-men or a well-woman test or a fertility wellness check, as we call it, is quite an important thing to do to reassure yourself that, yes, you can focus on your career. And most importantly, giving you some prioritizations. Like if I found out, okay, I've just gotten married, for example, and in theory, I'm not planning conception, but let's have a well woman and a well men test. If we find out that the woman has a declining ovarian reserve or the man has a declining sperm count, then you may prioritize having a family before anything else, or at least potentially take the call of freezing eggs or freezing sperm. So I think it empowers couples with a lot more information, especially when the technology is there. We should all be utilizing it positively to plan our futures, especially reproductive futures.
Absolutely, and this is something I recommend, along with my mother, who's also a doctor. We always recommend this to our patients, that before you get married, get your hormone levels done, get your basic fertility analyses done. So you can actually plan a family and plan for your future. And in the same way, what would you recommend for example, give me a rough idea for what counts would you recommend for somebody when they should go for natural conception, when they should go for IVF, when they should go for IUI and different assisted reproduction options? What are the counts you would go for?
Absolutely. This is a good question. And generally, couples who present to us with infertility, when we're doing the routine assessments, such as semen analysis, anything less than 15 million is considered to be a male factor issue. However, Tanea, these things are not written in stone. I have seen men with a 8 million or a 5 million sperm count also conceive naturally. Ultimately, we both know it takes one sperm to reach the fallopian tube and fertilize the egg. But obviously, these numbers or these thresholds are there for a reason. We are supposed to benchmark them. So anything less than 15 million is considered to be suboptimal when it comes to male fertility. Now, in terms of numbers, anything above 15 million is classified as a normal semen analysis. And couples could be advised that they could try naturally, at least for a period of 1 to 2 years. So as far as the British regulations are concerned, we classify infertility when conception hasn't happened within 12 to 18 months of trying naturally. So if that hasn't happened, then of course you can have all the detailed investigations. But if the sperm count is normal, if the lady's fallopian tubes are open, if there is a good ovarian reserve, then there is no reason why a couple cannot be trying naturally for 12 to 18 months. Having said that, as you know, working in the field of assisted reproduction, we do see a large cohort of patients who are classified as unexplained infertility, whereby the sperm is normal, the woman has got a good number of ovarian, good antral follicle count, a good hormone level called AMH.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I need to just cut you off for a second so I can kick
Sure.
my dog out.
Okay, no worries.
Apologies. Yes.
No worries, that's fine. So yeah, as I said that there is no clear cutoffs as to what can be done for at least in vitro fertilization. But if conception has not happened in 12 to 18 months, when a couple are trying, then at least at the assisted conception clinic level, we will then decide what treatment we are going to be applying to them when they come for treatment. And in severe male factor infertility, we may use a more an intervention called ICSI, or intracytoplasmic sperm injection. This is when the sperm is so low in count or quality that you cannot rely on the you cannot rely on the sperm to fertilize the egg naturally in a petri dish or a test tube. So what you have to do is you have to micro inject each sperm into the egg. And Tanea, this technique has been revolutionary because, 25 years ago or 30 years ago, men with a low sperm count would not be able to father a child, and they would have probably be guided towards donor sperm and so on. But now we have the technology whereby men with a very low sperm count can have their own genetic child. And as you know, a fair amount of infertility that we see in the clinic is to do with male factor. Typically, it shouldn't sound alarming, but 60% of the cases that we treat are male factor.
60%.
Yes.
Wow, that's a big number. And like, at least in the circuits in India, it's usually like the blame is put on the women.
Yeah, and I think it's we live in a very falsified society whereby, as you rightly said, that there's a lot of blame on the women, or it's always the woman who's considered to have a problem, and that's not the case. And this is a global issue. This is not just a problem of the West. Even in India, male factor infertility is on the rise. And the reason why we feel that this is on the rise is for several reasons. We all live in metro cities. Our lifestyles are very busy nowadays. The stress levels are high. Our food habits are declining in a very bad way. We are not really, in mobile phones and heat around the scrotum, and everything is leading to a very, very negative reproductive outcome. And that affects obviously our sperm count as well. So it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem globally. And as I said, 60% of the patients that we see in the clinic, the reason for them not conceiving is male factor.
That is such a staggering number when you actually think about it. So a lot of people, since this is quite a concern for people, that what if I'm not fertile, a lot of people who are actually smokers send in this question very, very often. Does smoking have any effect on your semen health, on your sperm health, and the parameters associated with it?
Absolutely, it does. It is one of the first things that we tell couples when we see them at consultation is to stop smoking if they're trying to conceive. There is ample of evidence to suggest that smoking has a very detrimental effect on sperm health, including sperm DNA fragmentation. So in couples who are trying to conceive, we always advise that the man and the woman completely stop smoking at least 3 months before they have any kind of assisted conception. So yes, absolutely. That goes without saying that smoking is a huge factor. Even, some people say, well, I don't smoke cigarettes, but I smoke shisha. And well, it's the same thing. Ultimately, all this is really known to affect the gonads, including sperm production, especially sperm DNA fragmentation.
Would you like to highlight why you specifically say 3 months before conception?
Yeah, sure. Because the journey of a sperm is 3 months. So once in the male reproductive tract, the sperm is made in the testicle, and then from the testicle it passes through various tubules called seminiferous tubules, and then ultimately when the sperm is mature, it is ejaculated out. So that journey from sperm being made in the testicle to it being ejaculated is a 3-month journey. So the reason to tell men to stop smoking for at least 3 months is so we can have a very clean wave of spermatogenesis or sperm production, so that we can get very healthy sperm which are not affected with any kind of degradation that nicotine may have on it.
Excellent. So since we are talking numbers and months, is there also a relationship of sperm health with your age? So is there anything like if I were a man and I fathered a child at 70 years of age, my child would be less healthy as compared to the child I fathered at, say, 40 years of age?
That's a very good question. So up till very recently, there was no evidence to suggest that men's age affects their sperm. And you may have heard of these classic things that 60-year-old men can also, father a child. And sometimes life seems very unfair that women after 40 struggle to conceive, and men, till they're 60, they can still have children. However, there is some very recent emerging data that has suggested that even in men after 45, the sperm parameters start declining. And more so, as I said, the intrinsic parameters of sperm that we cannot see, which has DNA breakage in the sperm head. So just to explain that, we all know that we have eggs and sperm, and within the eggs and sperm, we have the genetic material, which is called DNA. And, the more healthy the DNA, the more chances of conception. And again, recent research has shown that in men after 45, there is a higher level of DNA breakage or DNA degradation that can affect conception. So yes, we are learning more and more about male infertility. In some ways, men were quite ignored because everything was very female focused and female centric regarding egg health. Now there is a lot more research that is going around sperm health, sperm count, and male reproduction.
I see. That's very interesting. So, since we are talking about DNA fragmentation, what if, say, I have a patient and they do have increased rates of DNA fragmentation in their sample when they test for it? What would you recommend for a couple like that?
So this is again a very good question, because you do test in the hope that if you find something wrong, then there must be a there must be a solution for it. So typically in the UK, when men have a high level of sperm DNA fragmentation, then one of the options that we may give them is to have a bit of a lifestyle change. So men would start taking antioxidants, they would start eating healthy. If they're eating a lot of processed stuff, again, we would try and get a nutritionist perspective as well. Get them to try and to investigate if they have got a varicocele or something like that in their testicle. So all these investigations would need to be done as to why the men have high DNA fragmentation. One thing you may also note, Tanea, that in men who have a high DNA fragmentation, generally this shows up with the women having a high miscarriage rate. So it's not to say that men with a high DNA fragmentation will just not conceive. They may conceive, but the way this shows up is by their partners, the women who will having repeated miscarriages. This is one indication of the sperm DNA fragmentation to be tested. So in the clinic, if I see a couple who tell me they've had 2 or 3 miscarriages, the routine test that we would do is, of course, we would test what we call their karyotype, which is their chromosomes, to see if they carry any translocation. But we would also do a sperm DNA fragmentation to identify why is it that this couple are having repeated miscarriages. And as I said, if the sperm DNA fragmentation is high, then yes, the options are to either have a lifestyle change. And if the couples do not have that time of 3 to 6 months to focus on taking antioxidants and so on, then in the lab as well, we have now newer technology which allows us to select sperm with more intact DNA to give them a much better outcome through IVF.
It's amazing how far medicine has come. So going down the same vein, since we've been talking about DNA fragmentation and antioxidants, are there any supplements that you would recommend or you would say have actually shown any evidence in improving sperm quality and semen parameters?
So yes, in men, one of the minerals that is supposed to be taken in men who are trying to conceive is zinc. So zinc has shown to definitely have a very positive impact on sperm health. Generally, in men who are trying to conceive, we always recommend that they go on some form of supplements that contain zinc, arginine, and so on. So those are, there are many supplements that are available in the market. I would be quite cautious about just taking anything, simply because we all know that there's good stuff and bad stuff. One thing that I generally recommend my patients not to do is try and ingest any Chinese herbs or anything. Again, we know that there's a lot of that around. Couples go to Chinese herbalists and start boiling some of these herbs and drink that. That sometimes does interact or interfere with what we do. So I generally recommend that couples stay away from any kind of Chinese herbs, especially if they're trying to conceive through assisted reproduction. But I would also recommend that they take the typical Wellmen formulas for fertility. In the UK, we have brands like PregnaCare for men as well. We have brands like Proxseed, which is again a powder that men can just add in the water and drink it. And usually one such sachet a day, taken for about 2 to 3 months is plenty.
All right, and then you actually see a difference in their semen parameters
Absolutely.
from having these supplements. Excellent.
Absolutely.
That's very hopeful to hear. Additionally, what I see is, especially on Instagram, I see a lot of advertisements for increasing your semen health and stuff like that. So many shady things are available on the internet, and people are out there to fool. Just it's really unfortunate that because of the lack of information, people are out there peddling absolute nonsense to people, and actually people are going out and buying it.
I recommend, yes, you're right, absolutely. There's a lot of products out there in the market which are essentially very placebo-like, and they have absolutely no impact or no effect. But I would recommend that couples do try and seek, expert help when they're trying to conceive. Don't just shy away from having a semen analysis. If you're trying to conceive for 12 months and nothing's happening, then seek an opinion of a fertility specialist. You don't have to have IVF straight away, because again, what may be diagnosed is something very simple, So it's not to say that couples who end up seeking any kind of professional help from a fertility clinic will always end up having IVF. So again, this is a myth that people who seek fertility help don't always end up having IVF. Sometimes, as you know, we may do simple treatments like ovulation induction to just give them some tablets to make them ovulate, especially if women have got polycystic ovaries. And even if the sperm health is what we call borderline, we may wash the sperm in the laboratory and do something called intrauterine insemination in these couples. So IVF doesn't have to be the only solution. But going back to the responsibility factor, I strongly recommend that couples stay away from just getting anything off the shelf, thinking that this is going to improve things. It's worth spending a bit of money, getting expert help, and then ingesting products that are known to benefit sperm health rather than just take anything.
Absolutely. There's no be-all, end-all cure for everything.
Yeah.
In the same way, and I'm seeing in the comments, my mother is mentioning that in India, we used to use something called pital, which is an alloy of copper and zinc. We used to cook in pital vessels so that your intake of zinc increases overall. I mean, that's an interesting point. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
So if, for example, somebody's semen health is so bad that they have absolutely no sperm in their ejaculate, what would be the case here? What would you call this? How would we treat this? Are they ever going to father a child?
It's a very good question. So in about 10% of the cases, Tanea, that we see in the clinic, we would, between 5 and 10%, it could be considered to azoospermia. This is when the men have no sperm in the ejaculate. Absolutely no sperm. Now, this is not to say that couples or men who have no sperm in the ejaculate cannot have a child. In men, azoospermia or the lack of sperm can be caused by two parameters. We call it either obstructive azoospermia, when there is a blockage somewhere in the tube that leads from the testicle to the urethra. So, as I said, the sperm is made in the testicle. The sperm is then moves down the tube from the testicle and then moves into what we call the epididymis, which is a tube that leads the sperm out and out of the penis. Okay, so the urethra. So somewhere there could be a blockage. And despite the fact...
So this would be like a plumbing problem, essentially.
That's right.
All right.
So in the event there is a blockage on both the sides in men, or there's something called absence of the vas deferens, which is absence of the tubes. Some men have a congenital problem whereby they lack this tube from the testicle connecting it to the epididymis. So in these men, there is sperm production at the local level, which is the testicle, but there is no tube or there's no means for the sperm to pass from the testicle out of the body. Either it's in the form of an obstruction, or as I said, it's the tube is totally absent, and as you rightly said, a plumbing issue. In such cases, and again, these men would need to seek an expert opinion from a urologist, a doctor that deals with taking sperm from testicle is called a urologist. They would need to be investigated by a urologist, especially a male reproductive urologist, who would do some hormone tests in men to see what their hormone levels are for a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone, for example. So in men, if the follicle stimulating hormone is normal and yet they have no sperm in the ejaculate, then most likely these men have what we call an obstructive blockage. But this will only be diagnosed by the urologist. And in such cases, the intervention is amazing. What can be done is a needle can be passed straight into the testicle, or what we call the epididymis, and sperm can be retrieved directly from the testicle and be used in assisted reproduction using ICSI, which I mentioned earlier, which is called intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So all you need is single sperm that can be derived from the testicle and be injected straight into the eggs.
That's wonderful. I'm sure there are a lot of men that are listening to this that are cringing in horror right now, but this is also very, very hopeful to hear for so many people, that it can be, there's so many options, even in case you have zero sperm count, and it can be investigated further.
Absolutely. And as I said, that was if someone has an obstructive azoospermia. In a very small subset of patients, it is considered to be an non-obstructive, meaning that their hormone levels could be so high, the FSH can be so high, that there may be very little sperm production at the testicle level. Again, not to say that there is no sperm that can be found, but again, the urologist would be in a position to do a procedure called a micro-TZ, for example, whereby they would map out the testicle, and sometimes with the aid of ultrasound, they may be able to see which parts of the testicle may be producing sperm and which parts may not be. So when they do operate on this men, they will do an open procedure. It's a surgical procedure whereby the testicle is opened, and the urologist would go and in certain parts of the testicle to take bits of testicular tissue to see if there is sperm production. And Tanea, so many men have successfully had children, their own genetic children, from this technology. So it's absolutely revolutionary.
This is incredible. And I'm so glad to see there's so many options like this.
Yeah.
But similarly, in the case of somebody who has low sperm count, supplements are not working for them, they've tried everything, and still it's just not working out for them. What if they need to go to a donor? Is that possible? How does that happen? And what are the issues surrounding donor insemination and stuff like that?
Again, you see, I request that couples are very aware when choosing options of donor conception. I've heard of so many things happening, hush hush, whereby either they will ask one of their friends to produce a sperm sample and then self-inseminate at home. And I must say that that is very irresponsible. We all know that nowadays there's so many sexually transmitted diseases out there. And, we have to be very responsible and cautious. We can't be just doing procedures like, okay, someone will produce a fresh sperm and then it will be inseminated in another woman. That is not what donor conception is about. You have to seek help of a professional fertility clinic. That's the first step. Investigate the male thoroughly. Having no sperm in the ejaculate doesn't mean that you go straight into donor conception. As I said, the man has to be investigated by a urologist and a reproductive endocrinologist. Only once they have said that there is no chance of getting sperm because there could be primary testicular failure, for example, then donor sperm would be the last option. But when couples are considering to go for donor sperm, they have to buy the donor sperm from a reputable donor sperm bank, whereby all the sperm donors are screened very methodically and very thoroughly for STIs, and not just STIs, a very thorough family history is taken, genetic history is taken, so couples can feel confident that they're buying sperm or buying donor sperm, and ultimately we're creating a life out of this, right? So, you know, we have to take a lot of responsibility here. We want to make sure that we are doing everything within our means to ensure that we are taking the right precautions and making sure we're buying donor sperm from the right bank. And as I said, the first port of call would be the fertility clinic, who will guide you accordingly in terms of where to procure donor sperm from.
Absolutely. So just as you would invest in a nice car, you should invest in a nice semen bank and a nice doctor, just the same way. And I think more importantly, because you're actually talking about creating life at this point.
Absolutely.
So,
but I couldn't stress enough the number of people who write to me saying, my husband has no sperm and we're planning to use one of his friends as a sperm donor. This is illicit practice. That should not happen. That should not happen. That is considered to be very irresponsible, and you are endangering yourself, because we do not know what people's sexual activities are like. And it's not to say that it's only the STIs we should be worried about. There's many other diseases that can be there, which need to be screened. So going to a donor bank ensures that your donors are very well screened, and not just screened. Donor sperm has to be quarantined for 6 months. So the donors are screened for all the STIs before they produce the sperm, and 6 months after their samples have been in storage. Because we know that some of these viruses can be what we call latent viruses, and they may show up later. So in order to, and this is what a donor bank does, they make sure that those sperm samples are quarantined for a period of 6 months, and only after that, those samples are released for use.
Quarantine has a whole new meaning in ours these days.
It does.
Actually, in India, we had a film come out a couple of years ago called Wiki Donor.
Yeah.
And it was all about sperm donation. And since then, I've actually, even in the way my parents talk about donations and people just being free to talk about these things, it has changed dramatically. And it is being embraced very, very nicely these days. So we have something positive on this end of the world that way.
Absolutely. And I think there's no reason from shunning away from these day-to-day medical issues. And I consider reproduction as an area of medicine. So there's no point in shying away from it. It is part and parcel of routine medical care. Infertility is growing by the day. 1 in 6 couples have a problem trying to conceive and need expert help of a fertility clinic. So the numbers are very big, and hence there's no reason to shy away from seeking help, whether you have a cardiac issue or whether you have a reproductive issue. These are both medical issues that need expert help.
Absolutely, and I think you've summed it up very, very succinctly there. I'm just going to ask if anybody has any questions in the people who are viewing this right now. But aside from that, all the questions we got all through the day, you've actually addressed all of them wonderfully. And I'm sure people are going to leave very well enlightened about male fertility and the myths right after this. So I don't think we've got any questions that are related to fertility so far. We've got questions around different topics. Is smoking, yeah. So somebody did ask about smoking. We've got that addressed. And I think we've addressed everything that people had asked so far. So that's wonderful. Is there anything that you would like to end with, sort of a take-home message?
Yeah, sure. So I think talking about male infertility, I think I would like to end with a note saying that it's Father's Day today, and of course, for those of you who are trying to conceive, I know that somewhere within yourself there will be a void today whereby you really feel that you want to be a father, but do not despair. Do not give up any hope. And whether it's Mother's Day or Father's Day, I know all of us who are trying to conceive would want to take some comfort in knowing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Please do not feel that you're alone in this journey. There are many couples like yourselves who are trying to conceive and are still to see the success that is around the corner. But the way I would like to end is to inform couples that we live a very nuclear lifestyle these days, which is having a very negative impact on our reproductive health. The number of patients who I see who are not eating well, they're just eating a lot of processed foods simply because life has become so busy. We're buying a lot of fruits and vegetables with a lot of pesticides. So again, try and eat organic if you can. Try and take supplements, as I said, both for men and women. Supplements are not supposed to be replacing a good diet. I want to add to that. A good diet is paramount. Supplements are something to be added on to this. So don't please feel that if you're taking supplements, you can continue eating your hamburgers and chips. No, that's not the point. I'm stressing that in couples who are trying to conceive, it is very important to have a good mind and body balance, because of course your relationship has to really be at the right level. Please don't let the stress of conception affect your life with your spouse, because I appreciate that this can impact on a relationship as well. So again, if you have had any kind of investigations whereby you see that either it's a reduced ovarian reserve or a low sperm count that is causing the infertility issue, please don't look at it like this is my fault or her fault. This is always a couple's journey. Conception is something that a couple have to take through together. So this is not an individual fault. Please do not look at it like that I'm the reason for this pregnancy not happening. No, it's a journey that a couple have to take together. So good lifestyle, good diet, taking good supplements, wear loose underwear. Men, please, do not wear tight underwear. Please do not, and especially in India, the weather is very hot. A lot of men are on motorbikes. And again, if they wear tight underwear, the heat can be quite intense around the scrotum and the testicle. So again, some awareness around that. So yeah, just the routine things. There is a lot of information online that helps men to make sure how they can increase their reproductive potential.
Absolutely. That's very well put, especially with the entire heat issue. The people just either don't know or don't care. It's very unfortunate. But
Yeah.
you put that out very, very well. And thank you so much for that. For everybody who's worried about the IGTV being saved, this is going to go on the profile, so don't worry, we'll have this saved. And actually, Alpesh and I have been planning to do another live around alternative parenting that's supposed to possibly come out next week. We're going to have a discussion about this, but we're planning more interesting topics. And as you can see, Alpesh really knows his stuff and he really knows how to explain it well. So thank you so much for doing this, Alpesh, and let's do another one soon.
Thank you so much for your time, Tanaya. And as I said, hoping that you all have a lovely Father's Day in India. We're certainly having a lovely time here. And as I said, all of those, to be parents, please do not despair. There is help around the corner. Seek help of an expert fertility specialist who will definitely guide you through your options. But thank you so much for having me on the show today, and absolutely a pleasure to be speaking with you. And I look forward to the next live.
Same here, Alpesh. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
You too.